What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things, and today we are going to be revisiting an electric skateboard, the Inertian Raptor 2.1. Now, revisiting an electric skateboard that I had already reviewed, this is not something I typically do on the channel unless, one, it warrants it, like if there are some issues that I really need to address, or if it is just very interesting, which this board definitely is. I mentioned multiple times in other videos that I was going to do a follow-up to this, so this is that video. Now, I've got some pros and cons to go over with the Raptor 2.1, and the first one doesn't actually stem from the board itself, so I will set this down here. But what I actually want to talk about is their Nano X controller. I had mentioned in my initial review that some people like this remote, some people don't, and I was kind of on the fence. It feels okay in my hand. The controls worked pretty great from my initial testing. But if you read into the description of that video, which a lot of people don't for some reason, there's a lot of good information in those. But after filming that first video, I got all my thoughts together, I edited the video, I posted it, and then I went to charge the board, which I probably should have done before I actually uploaded that video. Now, the board was fine, but when I went to charge this controller, it is kind of cheap and plasticky feeling. And when I went to plug in the micro USB into the other controller, this right here is actually a replacement, the inside of the port there actually broke off from the circuit board in there and kind of pushed into the controller, meaning that I could no longer charge the original controller that shipped with the board. Now, I already mentioned this in that big eBoard showdown video, but I reached out to Inertian. They were pretty quick with sending a replacement. And since then, I've been a little bit more careful when plugging the controller in. The batteries in here do last more than one charge when compared to the board. So I did actually get about 2 or 3 rides out of the controller that had the faulty port on it, but now I got the new one and this one has been good so far. Now, when you're paying a lot of money for a board like this, that's definitely a big con. I really haven't experienced anything else like that with any other board that I've tested. Granted, I've tested boards with some really bad controllers, like bad to the point where I didn't even want to ride it anymore, so I still like this controller, but it was kind of a bummer that that happened. One good thing to note that I mentioned in some other videos is that Inertian is a fairly young company and they've experienced a lot of growing pains, which I've mentioned before. One thing that they did tell me is that they are planning on coming out with a new remote for the Raptor line. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what it's gonna look like, if there are gonna be different features. I don't know when this is even going to happen, but supposedly they are working on a new controller. So it's good to see that they are recognizing an issue and feedback from people like myself, and they are going forward to fix that. Now, moving into a pro of the Raptor 2.1, I did get a chance to test out not only the top speed, but also the distance of this board. And I have a little bit of cell phone footage to go along with this story. So as you guys know, I was traveling around the country. One of my stops was in Denver, Colorado. I spent about a week and a half out there. And since I had the Raptor 2.1 with me, I stopped at some place, I don't really know where I was, somewhere south of Denver, and I found a really nice sort of recreational running, biking, and now skateboarding trail. It was known as the Bear Creek Trail, and it goes for miles and miles. So I hopped on this trail with the Raptor 2.1 with a fully charged battery, and then I just started skating. I went out while checking the battery as I was riding. I rode as far as I could go in one direction until the board got to 75%. I then turned around and came back for another 25%, so the board was at 50. I was, of course, back where I started then, so I continued in the opposite direction this time until the board got down to 30%. I didn't want to split it up into 25 segments on the lower end of the board because I figured that there would be some battery sag and I might not make it back. So at 30%, I then turned around and came all the way back to where I had the van parked for a total battery depletion. Now, I was riding this thing down along the river. It was a really cool trail for anyone who is in the area and you're into riding electric vehicles like this. I would definitely recommend checking it out. And it was a really good test in some pretty ideal conditions as well. It wasn't super hot out. It obviously was not cold because it was the middle of summer. But for the entire trip, I kept the board in the slow mode, as you can see on the controller here. And now let me check out the app on my phone. I ended up riding this board for a total of 1 hour and 44 minutes. Now that is a long time to be on a skateboard, especially one like this, which is, I mean, kind of built for top speed and performance. It has a really stiff deck, and when you're riding in vans and things like that over all the cracks in the concrete, it's not the most comfortable thing ever, but I did make it work. Now, like I mentioned, I tried to keep this test as ideal as possible. My average speed was about 12.42 miles per hour. My max speed was just under 20 miles per hour because I was trying to be conservative. And from my testing for a rider that's about 180 pounds in pretty ideal conditions, I got the Raptor 2.1 to go a total distance of 21.64 miles. That officially makes this board the longest distance board that I've ever tested. There were some that probably could compete, but when you're riding a skateboard that long, it really honestly isn't that fun after a while. Now, of course, if you are testing one of these boards out and you weigh different or you're in different temperatures, maybe you're riding up and down hills a little bit more than I was, obviously your mileage is going to vary. However, I will say that I got pretty close to Inertion's estimate of this board, and I would definitely say that that is a pro. With my riding habits and the typical places that I ride, I could definitely get like 2 or 3 rides out of one full battery charge on here because I'm not going as fast as possible everywhere. And I'm also not riding for like 10 miles at a time. So I think that that is definitely some good stats coming from the Raptor 2.1. Now moving on to one more con that if you guys have been keeping up with the videos, you probably already know. In that big e-board showdown video, I found out another flaw to this board, which I had mentioned in my previous review. And that is of course related to the wheels and the quality control of these wheels. At the end of that big e-board comparison test video, I noticed right here that I'm starting to experience some pretty gnarly chipping out of this one wheel right here. Don't know if it expanded any more than that. It seems like it is just this area right now. There are 2 big chunks that I could easily pull off of there with my fingers. This wheel is fine. But like I mentioned in that initial review, this has been a known issue from customers, and it's also known by Inertion themselves. The front wheels on here are completely fine. I don't think I will have to replace those, but if I'm going to continue riding this board, I really think I'm going to need to replace the urethane around these hub motors back here. Now again, that is sort of quality control type of things like with this controller. It's like a minor inconvenience. The board is still going to work, but you're paying a lot of money for these things, so I really believe that Inertion should address things like that. So I reached out to them before I even knew that mine were chipping. I will reach out to them again. And I mentioned that a lot of customers that I've talked to were talking about how the wheels chip and they just degrade a lot faster than they actually should. So just like the remote and how Inertion is going to be replacing that and coming out with something better to kind of take care of any issues and improve the quality control, they also informed me that they are moving their wheel production to some place in California. Again, this is something that kind of comes with these young companies. They were going through a lot of growing pains early on in terms of shipping and getting boards out to their customers. Now they have sped up with that and supposedly things are moving a little bit quicker, but there are still some things that need to be addressed like the controller and the wheels. So moving their wheel production to California, I'm not exactly sure when that's gonna happen. I'm not exactly sure what that is going to do. Hopefully it will end up with them having some higher quality wheels and urethane for these boards. And it's definitely good that they are being proactive and they're going to hopefully fix something like this. There are replacements that you can put over these. But again, these boards are expensive and it sucks when you spend a lot of money and you have to replace things like that. So we went con, pro, con. Now let's finish off with another pro. And of course, we're going back to performance of this board, which is just insane. And we're going to get into some top speed testing of the Raptor 2.1. I filmed this stuff on the same day as I did the e-board showdown video, so let's roll some of those clips and I will come back with my final thoughts. All right, we're running some speed tests on the Inertion Raptor 2.1. I was trying with my original app and for some reason it's not liking the GPS signal here and I really don't think it's an accurate readout, so I'm gonna try out a new app. Hopefully this one works. I'm not sure if this will save my top speed or not. We will test it out though and see what happens. So the app that I'm using now is the Ulysses ULYSSE, Ulysses Speed app. I've used this before for like motorcycles and things like that with a RAM mount. This is giving me a readout of 31 max. I would say that's pretty close. I'm definitely going faster than what the other app was saying, so I think that was a pretty accurate test for the most part. You test it next to a car in the future, I guess.
We have a car here.
All right, try to match him. All right, stop. What was it? 33. It looked like 30.
30?
It's hard to match it perfectly.
I'd say that's good enough for a test.
Try one more.
I can get
One more?
let me get like rolling up to like 25, so then when you're next to me.
Okay.
So go now.
Go.
Not even. 30's the number.
The scientific.
30's the Subaru speedometer.
So there you guys saw in our spec mode. Like I have said in the past, this thing is just a complete beast. The riding experience of it is unlike anything else, and it's just crazy, crazy powerful. I did have to switch apps there, like I mentioned, so I will leave that new one in the description down below. So we got the readouts from the app on the phone in my pocket, and then also up against my friend Subaru there. And overall, I would say this thing kind of fluctuates around the 30 to 31, maybe 32 mile per hour mark. Of course, that also makes this board the fastest one that I've tested so far on the channel, and that's really no surprise to me. Not only does this board have the fastest top speed, but it also just feels the quickest. The power and the torque that it has when you're already like halfway through your top speed, it's just instantaneous and it's unlike anything else. Yes, there are some other boards that I've tested that have top speeds that come pretty close to the Raptor 2.1, but I guarantee you if you put this up against any of those other boards that have similar top speeds, say you're rolling from about 20 miles per hour, this thing is gonna smoke it from a 20 mile per hour roll, and it's just incredible. So that is the follow-up and the sort of recap on the Inertian Raptor 2.1. There are some really great pros to this board performance-wise. It's definitely a performance-driven board, and that's why they made it in the first place. But there are also some of those little cons that kind of turn into a big deal after a while. Like I mentioned, the company's young and they're kind of going through some growing pains, but hopefully they are able to address those sooner than later, and I can't wait to see the next generation of this board, because when this gets better, I don't even know what to say. It's just gonna be even more insane than it already is. So that is all that I got for today. If you guys have any questions, you can let me know in the comments down below. I'm definitely going to continue riding this thing, which is kind of an anomaly for the channel. I do test out a lot of boards. I have them sitting all over here, and this is definitely one that has piqued my interest enough to continue riding it. If I get any feedback from Inertian, I will try to leave that stuff in the description of this video. Definitely check out the other ones if you have not watched those yet. And then maybe in the future, I will do another follow-up. There's a really good chance that you guys are gonna see this thing on the channel some more in the future. So yeah, for now, I will leave it at that. Now, if you are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every week, and that is going to be all for today. So as always, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you in the next one.